It was the smell of my grandmother's beef stew that started it all. Not that my car had ever smelled like beef stew before, that it smelled like stale coffee, old fries, and the pine tree air freshener I'd bought 3 months ago and which had long since given up the ghost. But that Tuesday evening after the final rinse cycle at the Sudsy Bear on Overland Road in Boise, that's what hit me. A rich, savory, deeply familiar aroma that had no business being inside my 2017 Honda Civic. I remember glancing over at Chloe in the passenger seat. She was my coworker, a graphic designer who'd been loaned to my marketing team for the Big Gem State Potatoes rebrand that we'd been working late, fueled by takeout and caffeine, and her car was in the shop that I'd offered to drive her home. The car was a mess, a rolling testament to my bachelor life, and I'd felt a flush of embarrassment when she'd slid in, so I'd made the impulsive decision to hit the car wash. "You didn't have to do this, you know," Chloe said, a small smile playing on her lips. She had this way of talking that was both soft and direct, her eyes holding yours just a second too long. It was one of the reasons the entire office, myself included, was a little bit in love with her. "Consider it a necessity for public health," I joked, gesturing at the fossilized burger wrapper peeking out from under my seat. Now, as the giant, multicolored brushes retreated and the final jets of spot-free rinse water sheeted down the windshield, that smell bloomed in the enclosed space. It was unmistakable. Onions, carrots, celery, a deep beefy broth, a hint of thyme. It was my grandmother's recipe to a tea that she'd passed away 5 years ago, and no one had made that stew since. Chloe sniffed the air, her delicate nostrils flaring. "Wow, what is that?" "I have no idea," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. I leaned forward, sniffing near the vents. The scent was strongest there, as if it had been pumped in with the AI, or it was warm, comforting, and utterly, profoundly wrong. "Smells good," Chloe said, leaning back in her seat. The movement stretched her thin cashmere sweater across her chest, outlining the gentle swell of her breasts. I'd been trying not to stare all evening, but in the confined, dim space of the car, with the rhythmic thumping of the wash brushes now replaced by an eerie silence, it was impossible not to notice. The way the soft gray fabric clung to her torso, the way a stray strand of her dark hair curled against the pale skin of her neck. I felt a familiar low pull of desire, a warmth that was immediately chilled by the bizarre situation. "It smells like my dead grandmother's cooking," I said, and the words sounded absurd the moment they left my mouth. Chloe gave a light, uncertain laugh. "Weird marketing campaign? Like scent-based advertising? In a car wash?" I shook my head, putting the car in drive and easing forward onto the exit track. The smell didn't dissipate. If anything, it seemed to intensify, settling into the fabric of the seats, the carpets. It was a smell that belonged in a kitchen with checkered curtains, not in my Honda. We drove in a strange, fragrant silence for a few blocks. I was hyper-aware of her presence beside me, the scent of her perfume, something clean and citrusy, now completely obliterated by the phantom stew. I kept glancing at her legs, encased in tight, dark jeans that disappeared into stylish ankle boots. I imagined my hand on her knee, the feel of the denim under my palm, and the thought was immediately followed by a spike of guilt and a colder, sharper feeling of unease. I dropped her off at her apartment complex near the Boise State campus. She unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to me, her face half in shadow. "Thanks for the ride, Mark, and the aromatic experience." She smiled, a flash of white in the dim light, and for a second the weirdness of the evening was worth it. "Anytime, Chloe." She got out, and I watched her walk to her door, the sway of her hips hypnotic even in the context of my growing disquiet. She didn't look back. The drive home to my own apartment in the North End was lonely. The stew smell was my only companion. I rolled down all the windows, letting the cold Idaho night air rush in, but it was no use. The smell was baked in. It was in the sea air. It was the car. The next morning, it was still there, fainter perhaps, but undeniably present. I drove to work with a knot in my stomach, the comforting aroma now feeling like an invasion. My office was in a modern glass building downtown. Chloe was already at her desk in the open plan area, her focus absolute as she stared at her monitor, her bottom lip caught between her teeth. I forced myself not to stare at the line of her throat, the way her shoulders moved under her blouse. "Any more phantom meals?" she asked, looking up as I passed. Still lingering, I said, trying to sound casual. I'm starting to think I'm going crazy. Maybe you just miss your grandma, she said with a sympathetic smile. That was the logical explanation, wasn't it? A powerful sense memory triggered by, what? The steam from the car wash? The enclosed space? It had to be that. But then, on my lunch break, I saw him. I was sitting on a bench in Cecil D. Andrews Park, eating a sandwich, trying to clear my head. The park was busy with state workers and tourists enjoying the fall sunshine. And then my gaze landed on a man sitting on a bench about 50 feet away, directly in my line of sight. That he was just looking at me. Not in a casual, people-watching way. His stare was fixed, intense, and utterly devoid of expression. That he was an older man, maybe in his late 60s, with a thatch of thick, white hair and a gaunt, lined face. That he wore a simple, dark windbreaker and khaki pants. There was nothing outwardly threatening about him, but his unwavering attention was like a physical weight. That I felt a cold trickle down my spine. That I looked away, took a bite of my sandwich, and checked my phone. When I glanced back, he was still looking, not at the trees, not at the people, not at the Capitol building behind me. Me. I stood up abruptly, my appetite gone. I tossed the rest of my sandwich in a trash can and started walking back towards my office. My pace quicker than necessary. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes on me, a hot, uncomfortable pressure between my shoulder blades. When I finally risked a glance over my shoulder from the steps of my building, the bench was empty. I told myself I was being paranoid. The car wash thing had spooked me, that was all. Boise was a friendly city. People made eye contact. That evening, I decided I had to do something about the smell. It was making my skin crawl. I drove back to the Sudsy Bear. It was busier this time, a line of 3 cars ahead of me. I sat, drumming my fingers on the steering wheel, the stew smell a constant, taunting presence. As I inched forward, I studied the massive, gaudy structure of the car wash. It was a relic from the 80s, a long, dark tunnel with a brightly lit entrance, like the mouth of some garish beast. The giant brushes, now still, looked like the tentacles of a dormant monster. My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. Asterisk, how's the de-stinking going? Asterisk, the fact that she texted me about this sent a little jolt through me. I typed back at the scene of the crime. Will report findings. Asterisk, be careful. Maybe it's haunted. Asterisk, she replied, followed by a winking emoji. I smiled, but it felt weak. As I pulled up to the payment kiosk, the same pimply teenager from the night before was there. I rolled down my window. Hey, weird question, I began. Last night, after my wash, my car smelled really strongly of, well, food like beef stew. You guys don't like pump scents in here or anything, do you? The kid stared at me blankly. Scents? Dude, it's soap and wax. That's it. He gestured vaguely at the machinery. Sometimes it smells like cherry if we just change the air freshener tank, but that's it. Right, okay, thanks. I drove into the tunnel, the familiar routine starting up. The pre-soak, the thumping brushes. I watched the colored foam slide over the glass, and a part of me hoped, irrationally, that this would wash the smell away, that it would reset whatever had happened. The final rinse began, the water hissing against the car. I held my breath. The cycle ended. The exit light glowed green. I took a tentative sniff. Nothing. Just the clean, slightly chemical scent of soap and wet vinyl. Relief washed over me. It had been a fluke. A one-time weirdness. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and drove out into the twilight. I got about 2 blocks before it started. It began not as a smell, but as a taste at the back of my throat. Metallic, coppery, like blood. Then the smell hit, and it was so much worse than the stew. It was the smell of my first apartment, the one I'd shared with my college girlfriend, Rachel. A specific, unplaceable amalgamation of her lavender laundry detergent, the mildew from the shower curtain we never cleaned, and the particular musky scent of our sex. It was so vivid, so intimate, it was like a physical blow. I could almost feel the scratchy texture of that old couch, see the crack in the ceiling. Above it, I slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the curb. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I fumbled for the door handle, stumbling out onto the sidewalk, gulping in the fresh, cold air. I leaned against the car, my hands on my knees, feeling nauseous. This wasn't a memory, this was an invasion. This was something being done to me. A car honked as it drove past. I straightened up, feeling exposed and foolish. I got back in the car. The smell was still there, a ghost of my past life clinging to the interior that I drove home in a daze, the familiar streets of Boise feeling alien and menacing. The next few days were a slow descent into a low-grade paranoia. The smell in the car shifted that it never repeated. One day it was the sharp, clean scent of the hospital room where my son was born. A memory so powerful and joyful it brought tears to my eyes, followed immediately by a deep, chilling wrongness. Another day it was the smell of my father's workshop, sawdust and motor oil, a smell I hadn't encountered in 20 years. Each one was a core memory, a deeply personal landmark in the geography of my life. And I kept seeing the man that he was never close, always at a distance, standing under the awning of a shop across the street when I left work. Sitting in a different car in the parking lot of my grocery store, that a still, watching figure in the rearview mirror a few cars back, that he never waved, never smiled, never made any gesture, that he just observed. I started taking different routes home, that I started checking the locks on my apartment door twice, 3 times, that I found myself staring at photographs on my phone, as if to reassure myself that my memories were my own, that I was distracted at work, jumping at sudden noises. Chloe noticed. She cornered me by the coffee machine on Friday. "You okay, Mark? You look like you haven't been sleeping." Her concern was a warm balm. She was wearing a V-neck top, and as she leaned against the counter, I found my eyes drawn to the smooth, tan skin of her collarbone, the gentle shadow between her breasts. The desire was still there, a hot, persistent thread, but now it was tangled with a frantic, fearful energy. I wanted to pull her close, to bury my face in her hair and tell her everything, to feel the solid, real warmth of her body against mine. The thought was so vivid I could almost feel the weight of her. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice rough. "Just some weird stuff going on. Car trouble." "Still the smell?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "Something like that." I wanted to tell her about the man, but the words sounded insane in my head. A strange old man is stalking me and my car is haunted by the ghosts of smells past. That weekend, I decided to take a drive up to Bogus Basin, the mountain resort north of the city, that I thought the clear, pine-scented mountain air might cleanse the car and me. I was about halfway up the winding highway, the city sprawling in the valley below, when the smell changed again. This one was different. It wasn't a memory. It was a place I'd never been. It was the smell of a strange, cozy, slightly dusty home. Lemon polish, old books, a hint of cat and something cooking, a lamb roast, maybe with rosemary. It was a pleasant smell, but it was utterly alien. It felt like walking into a stranger's house and taking a deep breath. And that's when the full, horrifying realization dawned on me. What if it wasn't my memories? What if the car wash was somehow imprinting the memories of other people? Their lives, their homes, their most intimate moments? The stew, the apartment, the hospital, the workshop, they were all from different eras of my life. But this was someone else's. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I pulled over at a scenic overlook, my mind racing. I looked in the rearview mirror. My own pale, frightened face stared back. And then further back, just pulling into the overlook behind me, was a dark, nondescript sedan. The driver's door opened and the man with the white hair got out. He didn't look at the view. He just stood by his car about 100 yards away and looked at me. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. I threw the car back into drive and sped off, my tires spitting gravel. I drove recklessly down the mountain, taking corners too fast, my eyes flicking constantly to the mirror. He was there. He followed me all the way down, maintaining a precise, unhurried distance. He wasn't trying to hide anymore. He followed me to my apartment building. I screeched into my parking space, ran inside and slammed the door shut, locking it and leaning against it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I peered through the peephole. A few minutes later, I saw his car drive slowly past, then continue down the street and disappear. I was trapped. My car was a haunted object, and I was being stalked by its silent keeper. I called in sick to work on Monday. I couldn't face the drive, couldn't face the pretending. Chloe texted me, asking if I was okay. I didn't reply. My desire for her felt like a relic from a simpler, saner time, a life I'd been forcibly evicted from. On Tuesday, I knew I had to do something. This was insanity. I needed proof. I needed to confront this. I decided to go back to the car wash one last time. During the day, when it was busy that I would record everything on my phone, that I would talk to a manager, that I would find a logical, mundane explanation and cling to it like a life raft. The Sudsy Bear was quiet at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday that I pulled up to the kiosk, that a different attendant, a bored-looking woman in her 40s, took my money. "Before I go in," I said, holding up my phone, "I'm just recording a quick video for a IA project that I asked. That cool?" She shrugged. "Whatever, dude." I started the recording, narrating as I drove in. "Okay, it's Tuesday, October 24th, 2:07 p.m. that I'm entering the Sudsy Bear on Overland. My car has been experiencing anomalous odors after previous washes, that I'm documenting the process." The tunnel swallowed me, the machinery clanked to life, that I held my phone up, filming the brushes as they descended, the foams swirling, that it all looked so mundane, so mechanical. There were no hidden pipes, no secret nozzles, just soap and water. Then came the final rinse, that I held my breath, the phone steady, the water rained down, and then a glitch, that a flicker in the lights overhead, that a momentary dimming. And in that half-second of relative darkness, I saw him. Standing in the tunnel, that he was just outside my driver's side window, standing perfectly still in the space between the moving machinery and the wall, a place no human could or should be. It was the man with the white hair. His clothes were dry, his eyes were locked on me, and for the first time, there was an expression on his face that it wasn't anger or menace. It was a profound, bottomless curiosity, like a scientist observing a specimen in a lab. The water sheeted over my window, distorting his image for a second, and when it cleared, he was gone. That I screamed, that a short, sharp yell of pure terror, that I dropped my phone, the camera still rolling, pointed at the footwell. The car wash cycle ended, the exit light glowed, that I was frozen. My hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, that I couldn't move, that I couldn't breathe. The car behind me honked, a long, impatient blast. The sound jolted me into action, that I stomped on the gas, lurching out of the tunnel and into the bright, shocking normality of the